Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be with you all and excited for our conversation this morning. I am Mary Cypress Metz, and I'm our Senior Vice President of Strategy at SCORE, and really excited for a rich conversation today about reimagining high school for economic opportunity. And SCORE's mission is to catalyze transformative change so that all Tennessee students can have success. And we have a goal that every student has the opportunity to earn a degree or credential that prepares them for a career that enables economic independence. And we believe that there is a lot that can be done throughout a student's whole pathway to help them towards that goal. And we know that high school is a key lever for that. And so excited to have a conversation today about just that. What are ways that we can think about high school differently that prepare more students for economic opportunity and really uses high school as that on-ramp to that economic opportunity for students? So we're going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning. I'll walk us through a little background information and data about what do we know about students' pathways today and what's working in high school, and where do we have gaps. But then we're going to spend most of our time in discussion, and I'm really excited for three guests that we have joining us for this conversation. Deborah Knoll, who's the Assistant Commissioner for College, Career, and Military Readiness at the Tennessee Department of Education. Dr. Scott Laband, Scott Laband, who's with Colorado Succeeds and is really thinking about how does this work happen in Colorado. So excited to learn from a state that is already thinking about this. And then Dr. Scott Langford, who is the superintendent of Sumner County Schools here in Tennessee and is really thinking about this at the local level. And I'm going to have a lot of fun talking to two different Scotts in this discussion. So really excited for us to dive in to the conversation. But before we do that, just want to take us back to a little bit of why we are even having this conversation. So we know that data shows us that a post-secondary credential of some kind is essential for career success because over 60% of jobs in Tennessee require some form of a degree or credential. We've made a lot of progress towards this goal as a state. We've gone from 31%, about 31, 32% up to almost 49% in the most recent data. And that's tremendous. And yet, we know that there's still gaps in knowing, particularly, are these degrees and credentials that students are earning connected to the jobs that we have? How are we thinking about that? And so that is a key opportunity for us to think about. But so if we know that some type of degree or credential is needed, it's also helpful to zoom in and understand, well, um, what does it look like? Where are the breakdowns of students not actually earning those degrees and credentials? And when we zoom into the student experience, we see that too many students fall off at different points and miss out on the opportunity that their pathway could provide. This data is always really compelling to me and eye-opening to me because when you think about if you had 100 high school students starting ninth grade, 92%, so 92 of those students will graduate high school in Tennessee. But of those 92, only 52 actually enroll in some type of post-secondary training. And of that 52, only 37 return for a second year, and only 17 of the original 100 actually complete post-secondary education on time. And so we think about that, and there's a lot of points where students are falling off in that. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is how can we kind of we have 92% who are graduating high school. How can we think about that high school experience to help accelerate students and ensure that they're able to complete that pipeline? We also, and so if you dig in a little deeper, of those 92%, the gap between those who are graduating and those who are actually enrolling is actually growing. It's not something that's decreasing, which is what we would hope to be seeing. It's widened over the last 10 years, signaling that that gap of students actually earning the skills and the training and experiences they need to find success is actually widening. And to top that off, that's just kind of broadly in general, students pursuing post-secondary. Um, but students have more options than ever before. And we are providing them with limited information about how those different pathways lead to different opportunities for them. Not every degree and credential leads to the same opportunity for students. And, students have lots of reasons why they choose their pathway, but equipping them with understanding how do different pathways lead to um, the job opportunities that will be available for them when they enter the workforce, and how do they understand which opportunities will provide them and their family with the earnings needed to sustain a living wage, creates more opportunity for us to really focus in on how are we ensuring that we're really guiding students on these pathways to economic opportunity. And we believe that that begins in K-12, and particularly the high school experience is such an important opportunity to help guide students on that. Imagine a world where we were able to provide every high school student with the opportunity to really accelerate that pathway, to think about how they are taking advantage of the opportunities created for them in high school. We'll talk about some of those today, and use that as this launch pad into um, their degree or credential, their workforce training that's really going to set them up and their family up for economic opportunity. So I'm excited to talk about that with our panel today, and we're really going to dig in. But before that, um, let's think about what do we know about high school itself today. So that was kind of what do we know about pathways broadly, what is happening to students from post-secondary to career and that economic opportunity. But what do we know about what's actually happening in high school today? Um, One of the things that is a great opportunity that Tennessee has created is this opportunity to really use high school as an accelerant to a degree or credential. Our state provides every student with the opportunity to take 5 dual enrollment courses at no cost to the student. So that's 5 post-secondary level courses while in high school that the state will offer, and even more for some areas. And so you think about that, you could earn a lot of post-secondary credit while in high school, and using some of that, there's even some credentials that you could really almost earn while in high school if you were to take full advantage of that. But we know that more than half of high school students only participate in two dual enrollment courses. While they're in high school, and we don't yet know, are those courses connected to each other? Are they actually accelerating them on a pathway? And that seems like a huge opportunity for us as a state. Other things that our state really offers, and in communities across the state, are work-based learning experiences. So earning the skills and training through the coursework you're taking is one way that you're preparing for a career. Another way is how are you actually getting that kind of hands-on real-world experience while you're in high school? And we create that opportunity for our students. And we know a lot about the impact of work-based learning while in high school. You're more likely to enroll in post-secondary. You're more likely to complete post-secondary, and you'll have 11% higher earnings 6 years after graduation. And so there's really a compelling reason why this is a great opportunity for students. Yet only 1/4 of our high school students are actually participating in work-based learning today. And so we give students the opportunity to take post-secondary courses, to get that real-world work-based learning experience, and the opportunity to earn credentials while in high school alongside that diploma. Um, Tennessee has created the opportunity for students to earn industry credentials while in high school to demonstrate their mastery of certain skills or competencies on their pathway. And we had more than 50,000 students earn an industry credential this last school year, which is such an opportunity for students. However, it's unclear how supporting students towards those credentials is actually connecting them to their career path. And so a lot of opportunity to think about this great opportunity where we have a lot of students participating in it, to really connect that to and use it to propel students to economic opportunity. But then finally, even with these opportunities that we've created as a state that are incredible and things that many states don't have, we still know that too few Tennesseans are able to kind of enter the workforce and have the skills needed to find success. And a key place for us to start that process is by supporting students who are in high school to really accelerate that path to economic opportunity, to ensure that there are opportunities for students to earn the skills and the competencies and the training and exposure to opportunities while in high school that really helps prepare them for their career. And so I'm excited for us to welcome three people who are doing deep and impactful work to really think about high school differently. And so I'm excited to have three panelists join us for today's discussion. I mentioned earlier we have Deborah Knoll with the Tennessee Department of Education, Scott Laband with Colorado Succeeds, and Dr. Scott Langford with Sumner County Schools. Thank you all for being here with us today, and thank you for being willing to spend your Friday morning talking about high school. I think this is probably a fun conversation for this group, and so I'm really excited for us to dig in and think about what's working, where are there opportunities, what are examples of places that are doing it differently. But let's start with a few introductions, and I'm going to also ask you kind of a personal question along with that, with your introduction. So when I think about my own high school experience, there's a lot of things that I'm really glad I did as a high school student that either teachers or advisors encouraged me to do, or my parents encouraged me to do, or I decided to do. And there's probably things that I look back and wish I would have done different classes I would have taken, different experiences I wish I'd taken advantage of. And so I would love for each of you all to please introduce yourself and share kind of where you're coming from and why you're in this conversation. But also, I'd love to just hear what's one thing you wish you had done differently in high school to prepare you for kind of life and career opportunity. Scott Langford, I'm going to start with you, and this is going to be really fun to go back and forth on my two Scotts. So Scott Langford, I'll start with you and then go to Deb and then Scott Levan.
Okay. Scott Langford, Superintendent of Schools in Sumner County. And I would say for me, I got to do 2 years of FFA. I did parliamentary procedure, I did public speaking, a lot of leadership stuff. It was a great opportunity, but then I had to make a choice because we had 6 periods. I played football and basketball. So I had to choose. I couldn't do all three. So I chose football, basketball, and then I chose college prep at the time. And that meant that I had to eliminate FFA and all the great things that I learned there, which I actually use almost every day. So that would be mine.
I love that. But tell us who you are and what you're doing now.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
Yeah. So I'm superintendent in Sumner County Schools, and I think probably I was a high school principal before, and one of the things that I found frustrating is it was hard to innovate because even 2014 to 2018, I could see students dropping off of the radar. And we had a lot of really strong CTE programs at White House where I was principal, but I could just see that we needed to have some systemic changes in the way that we approached high school. So now, over the last year and a half, and especially in the last 6 months, as we've opened our innovation center, I can see the opportunities to be able to transform high school at scale to provide economic opportunity, but also to help kids find their first and future career.
Thank you for that. Deborah?
Great. Thank you so much. I'm Deborah Knoll. I'm the Assistant Commissioner over Postsecondary Workforce and Military Readiness at the Department of Education. I've been there for about 11 years. What really kind of stuck out about my high school experience is I grew up in a rural area in Colorado, and I didn't have the opportunity to take advanced placement courses. Even though we had a college in town, there really wasn't an opportunity to do like a dual enrollment, anything like that. But my aspirations were to go to a military academy. And so I had to get really creative and build my own pathway to really stand out from the rest of the crowd. So I went ahead and I got my private pilot's license so that I would be competitive in that space, as well as, I interacted with sports. I was on the track team, things like that. So looking back, I wish I had a pathway that allowed me the different opportunities that I needed and afforded me to be successful in my quest to go to a military academy. I did go to military academy. I graduated with a commission in the United States Navy. But along with that, I have a welding certification. I went to firefighting school. I know how to work a lathe and do a lot of metal cutting and things like that. So that has really propelled me into what my passion is today. And it's really centered on everything that I do at the Tennessee Department of Education. So it's all about building pathways for students no matter where they are. That's where that post-secondary comes in. You know, we really value the TCAT, the 2-year and the 4-year experiences for our students, but it's really being transparent around what those pathways mean. CTE is really foundational. I did an academic track. I did not do CTE courses in my own high school because it was either academics or it was CTE. It wasn't one of, you couldn't do both things. So I really strive to hold the messaging around the and. I think the and is so important because it allows the opportunities for students no matter where they are in their journey. And then, of course, the military readiness. That's something new for the Tennessee Department of Education. And going to a service academy and being in the military myself, I know there's a lot of valuable opportunities in those pathways for our students. So I love what I do. I love what we all do collectively for students, and I'm very passionate about this work. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Deborah. And I'm excited to dig in on you really forged your own path and nothing was going to stop you. You're going to find these opportunities, but I'm excited to talk about how can we help enable all students to have more of these opportunities. Scott Laband, tell us a little bit about you, what brings you to this conversation, and also what do you wish looked different for you in high school?
Well, thanks so much, Mary Cypress, and thanks so much for the opportunity to be with all of you. It's truly an honor and a pleasure. So I am the CEO of Colorado Succeeds. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that engages the business community in the conversation around education, systems change, workforce development. We do that through both public policy, but also through engaging directly in building public-private partnerships between employers and learning providers like school districts or post-secondary providers. First off, I would also like to thank you for the honorary doctorate, Mary Cypress. I'm going to add that to my LinkedIn profile. The thing that I think for me when I look back on high school is I was a very compliant student. I did student council. I got good grades. I worked hard. I knew I would go to college, but that's pretty much all I knew. And I did not have a lot of entrepreneurial or risk-taking kind of mindset. And so I took a very traditional path and I never really took risks or pushed myself to explore in any kind of work-based learning or career experience. And so that is a big regret of mine, to be honest, was just kind of head down, focused on the books and not necessarily expanding my view into what could be from a much broader point of view. I was lucky to figure that out later on, but it took a while to get there.
I appreciate that, and a lot of these experiences resonate with me. And I think a theme that I'm just hearing is what if I could have made more of my high school experience and it wasn't a I wish I knew then what I know now type of experience. It's really I had to make trade-offs and I had to think about things differently. And so I'm excited to think about how can we really think about what does it look like to give students every opportunity while in high school to really think about how does the time spent in high school really help students take advantage of all of those opportunities so that they're propelled on this pathway. And I think there's some things that are working well right now to do that. And there's obviously also opportunities to continue to improve. And so let's talk about that a little bit. And before we dive deeper on some of the things you're each individually doing, I have one more question for all of you. And maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. But we're talking about the opportunity of how can high school accelerate students on a path to a fulfilling career and economic opportunity. And so share with us some of your reflections on how is high school today currently fulfilling that promise and how is it not? And Scott Laband, we'll start with you.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I mean, I think this conversation is indicative of really how the system is changing right now. And in many ways, I would say in the most recent 10, 15, 20 years, we're seeing CTE have a much more rigorous definition. It is much more industry aligned and industry connected. I think we're doing a good job in high school of really connecting into the labor market, and particularly in working with employers to, make the experiences that young people are learning in schools really pop and really have a sense of meaning to them. I think for a meaningful percentage of students, we're also providing accelerated pathways that are helping them, identify their next step and identify how they move towards that and make, actual momentum and progress toward that now. They're building credentials, they're building networks, they're creating social capital, and that's really promising, and I think having a lot of success. I think the challenge for me is that is the exception, not the norm in most high schools today. It's not the default experience. And that is sort of why I do this work, is to think about how and what would be required for that to be the experience for every single student, regardless of your zip code, regardless of who your school leader is, regardless of whether or not you know that you have to opt into some of these things. What if that was the default? And so for me, that what I'm concerned about, those who do tend to take advantage of these programs are oftentimes those who have, strong degree of privilege in one way or another. And what does it look like to make sure that all students, particularly those who might be first generation or this might be new to their family, how do we make sure that they find out about it and they get access to it? The two other things that I see is just a systems misalignment in general between education and employment. Again, education and schools tend to be organized around seat time, compliance, credit accumulation. Their schedules are oftentimes designed for adults. If you look at the economy, it's designed around skills and competencies and networks and adaptability and entrepreneurialism. And so I think there's a connection there that we need to continue to work to build upon. The next piece I would say is a signaling issue. I think we've gone a long way on this, but there's still some subtle cues that, there's a traditional experience or path, or that real success looks a certain way. And those are the things that I think can really undermine or can unintentionally kind of default students into particular decisions that may or may not be right for them, or can put pressure on them or feel a sense of stigma. And those are things that we really want to avoid and change. The last thing I would say is, right now, I think in general, the high school experience is designed from the master schedule forward. What I would love to kind of reimagine is, what if we took the most expansive vision possible of a student's future, and then backwards planned the high school schedule to allow for that to happen? To me, that's what's needed to make sure that every student graduates with both a pathway and a plan.
That really resonates, Scott, and I appreciate you ending on that, because I think that's really the hope in all of this is not reimagine high school for the sake of reimagining high school. How do we reimagine it to actually be student-centered and to actually support students on those pathways? Deborah, what about you? How is high school fulfilling its promise right now? How is it not?
Yeah, so really just to piggyback off of Scott's comments there, when I joined the department back in 2015, we were really siloed at the Department of Education. So I joined the Division of College, Career, and Technical Education, which was outside academics. And so we really were centered on that, or we never really had those conversations with the math and with the science and with those folks. Today, we fall under the CAO, so our Chief Academic Officer, all together in one. So I do think we're breaking down those silos, not only within the Department of Education, but across state agencies as well. So when we're having conversations around credentials of value, we're not doing it alone. We're having those conversations with the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. We're having conversations with THEC. We're having conversations with TVR. And so it's kind of going from a way of access, because back in 2015, it was all about access. Dual enrollment was just gearing up here in Tennessee. We were just unveiling some of the dual enrollment grants. And so it was just all about access. Like what can they have access to? And so I think we have solved for that access, but unintentionally, then we have not really been, cognizant of the pathways. Like what do these really lead to? When you think about cosmetology and those types of things, or culinary arts, those are really wonderful pathways, but what is the transparency around that? Like, what is it really leading to? What do those industry credentials really mean in the big scheme of things? So I think that's kind of what we're moving into, is being more intentional, being more transparent, and really connecting, not just across academics and CTE, but connecting across our state agencies to have those really intentional conversations to really ensure that we are giving students the best opportunities where they go, to workforce or to post-secondary. And it's all those on and off ramps at any time. It's just having that information at their fingertips in order to be able to make those decisions. So we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. But I'm really, really, I guess, happy about just the conversation. Like even today, like this conversation would never have happened, 10 years ago. And I think we're all collectively going in the right direction. So excited about that.
I appreciate that, Deb. And I think that charge of how do we recenter high school around what the student experience needs to look like, and then how do we actually look at what are the outcomes students are having from all of this, and really use that to drive how we have this conversation is so important. Scott Langford, what about you? How
Yeah.
is high school fulfilling the promise? How is it not?
Well, first we'll have to jump into military readiness and preparation. I'll have to tell Deborah, beat Navy, go Army, but we won't bring that rivalry in. But I would say I think just to echo what they say, so I'll go quickly. I think here, I think we've made measures an end. So we've made graduation rate, rightfully so, when it was abysmally low in Tennessee. We made it an end, and we all, I mean, to Scott's point, we backwards planned from high school graduation, and that became our end. And that's created a thing where we've lost our mission and purpose, and that makes it hard to align all the pieces. Because I would argue Tennessee has done, I think, the best work in the nation at getting all the pieces in place to wed career technical education and academics so that there's not a dichotomy, but they're together. But I think that what holds us back should be pretty easy to fix, because we've just got to rediscover our mission. Because I would argue our kids today, in addition to what Scott said, our kids are either going to be, this generation is either going to be the most missional or the most transactional. I see them every day wanting to be missional, but we're putting them, because we've made a measure an end, we're putting them in a place where they're looking at college or career as a way to see how much money they can make, while at the same time they're desperately wanting to do things that serve their community and serve others. And I think we can do both of those things. I think the data already shows that. So I'm really excited. I know that's high level, but I think if we can focus on alignment and mission, and I love what Scott said about backward planning from students' future dreams.
Well, thank you for that, Scott. And I appreciate you helping us really understand and what are students actually thinking about right now? What do they care about? Which I know will be such a theme throughout this conversation. So let's look outside of Tennessee first, and then we're going to come back into Tennessee. So, Scott, Laband, Colorado has been a leader, in my mind, in connecting education with economic opportunity. And Colorado Succeeds has been a leader in making that happen. But you all are a place that I really think has been doing this well. And so can you walk us through what are some of the steps that Colorado has been taking, is taking to reimagine the high school experience?
First off, thanks for the nice words. I would say the very same thing back to y'all in Tennessee. I mean, we definitely look at this as like iron sharpening iron, because we in many ways look to you for your examples in so many key ways. But for us, this journey started about 10 years ago. We really fundamentally believe in this concept of ground up innovation, and that you change systems by changing the hearts and minds of educators who are closest to the student. And so for us, that means empathy building in community with educators, with students, helping them kind of rethink the profile of a graduate, and what are the skills and competencies that means to be successful in their future. We call it the educonomy, this idea of being ready for education or the economy, and that those are defined locally. For us, we intentionally worked with rural communities because we believe and have found in our experience that they have what I would call the hack mindset. They're willing to move fast and break things. And I think that's needed in this space when you're trying to push into innovation. This entrepreneurial mindset is something that we really deeply value and look at. This idea that you don't have to have all of the answers 100% of the way defined before you make a decision. We would try to bring a business mindset of, let's get to 80%. If you can see 80%, that's enough to go and to try. And piloting, right? I mean, we really fundamentally believe that every pilot matters. no matter how small. It's important. And this is why, because every dollar that's invested in a pilot is invested in two times. It's one, trying to make sure that that student experience is better for is the learners that that pilot touches, but also it's important in terms of the learnings that that creates for systems change down the road. And so every dollar works twice when we invest wisely and smartly in pilots. And so we did that across the community, across rural communities across Colorado. From there, we took their learnings and in partnership with them designed a policy agenda, a policy platform, a framework, a vision for what this looks like. It's not dissimilar from what you all are doing. We call it the big three, but essentially it's, every student have access to concurrent enrollment, to an aligned industry credential or certification, and work-based learning that's aligned and on a pathway. What we really hope is that this is the expectation, not the exception. And so for us, the next piece was trying to build supportive state systems that allow for that to happen. And so we, in most recent legislative sessions, created a performance fund that is really about the student outcome. And so for students who complete those things, those high schools and those districts are going to get additional revenue because we want to reward success, pay for success. And when these good things happen, we want those who are making it happen to benefit from it. We looked at our accountability measures in the high school particularly to examine what were we measuring and how that was actually very narrowly defined to a more traditional experience, and instead reimagine the metrics that actually align with this big three experience. The next thing for us was flexibility in the school day. That's something that we're still trying to figure out, but trying to provide for more opportunities for, seat time requirements and ensuring that credit counts, whether it's in a workplace or whether it's in a school building. And so that's something we've made some headway in, but honestly have more to do. We're working to align governance. So our Workforce Development Council, which sits in our Department of Labor, our Postsecondary Education Department, and our K-12 Education Department are doing more across the system to try and collaborate, connect, and align around a consistent set of outcome metrics that everything is moving towards, thinking about, aligning funding, aligning accountability structures, aligning supports. Unified data is a big piece for us. We're really investing heavily in a state longitudinal data system to ensure that we can monitor progress and success against this. And then lastly, kind of reimagining the role of employers. So moving from this idea of the consumers of talent to the co-producers of talent and being connected right from day one, not as a philanthropist, but as a designer who helps come up with what that educational experience should look like, but then also help deliver it to make sure that they're bringing those real world insights into the experience. And we believe that if we do that well, they'll also help contribute to it from a financial point of view as well.
Thanks for that, Scott. And maybe one follow-up. There's a lot of threads there that I want to dig back in on in a minute, but maybe just, you just painted a vision of what y'all are creating for Colorado. And so what outcomes are you seeing for students now? And what outcomes do you hope to see in the future?
Oh, yeah. So the outcomes that we most value are, like you said, economic independence, economic security. For us, that means we want to know the wages that young people are earning on into the future, and we want that to continue to grow over time. So for us, completion is like a very low bar, but it's a bar that really matters. Employment is the next piece, because if we think about economic mobility and economic independence, for most people, that's going to mean some kind of a job. And then ensuring that we're tracking, like I said, those wage gains year over year. That's the longitudinal vision of being able to identify, long into the future, what are the pathways that are best setting up young people for success. And then being able to provide that information back to educators so that they can, either redesign, adapt, monitor, continue to tinker and improve the programs that they're offering, and then also providing that information to policymakers so that they can supercharge the ones that are going really well, and then finally giving that information to students so that they can use it in their decision-making process around the different pathways that they may want to explore.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think just kind of what are we anchoring towards is always such a helpful way to think about this. So you mentioned at the beginning of your remarks, Scott, some, you looked to Tennessee and there's a lot of similarities there. I mean, a lot of these policy pieces you just mentioned, Tennessee has put in place, and there's a lot of things that are happening, whether it's, investing in dual enrollment, opening up, kind of new pathways and flexibilities for students investing in innovative high school models. Thinking about accountability structures and funding incentives to really prioritize pathways, which is so important. And yet we look back to some of the data that I talked through at the beginning, and we're not yet seeing some of these outcomes for students. And I'm excited about some of the work the Department of Education is doing right now to really think about how do we harness all of this great opportunity that we've created, the collaboration we have in Tennessee, and really leverage it to support students on those pathways. So, Deb, I would love for you to share a little bit about the department's vision and the work that you all are doing to really think about this high school experience for students.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it really it's very similar to what you're doing in Colorado, Scott. We call it a 4-pillar strategy instead of the big 3, but there's a lot. I mean, very much a similarity there. So what we are centered on are 4 different things. So credentials of value, individualized advising, seamless transitions, and work-based learning. And so we really feel that this is a very comprehensive approach to really improving those student outcomes and making sure that we meet those needs for those students. And so what I'm excited about this work is that when we talk with our neighboring states here, they may be centered on just trying to solve for the credentials of value, or they may be trying to solve for the work-based learning, those types of pieces. But we really know that we call it the 4-pillar strategy, that each pillar is very dependent on the other one. You really cannot solve for work-based learning without thinking through seamless transitions or credentials of value without that individualized advising. And so we really take this, comprehensive approach. And so when we talk about credentials of value, what we are trying to do is, meet Department of Labor at the table, meet TVR at the table, and come up with one state list around what credentials of value are. And to your point, Scott, when we talk about credentials of value, it's not just the value in the workplace, it's also the value in that post-secondary. So when a student earns, a CompTIA fundamentals or CompTIA A+, and they, articulate to, post-secondary, they're not having to repeat that. Like what kind of credit does that really give them? As well as what is that value out in the workplace and what is that true value? And so what we are really doing is taking a different approach with those credentials of value. We have redesigned a rubric to really capture that high wage, high skill, in demand type data, along with that employer verification. And so really trying to hone in on what do employers and what does industry really value out there? And what is the data that supports that? So that's kind of where we are centered in that credentials of value. Last year, our Tennessee students earned over 70,000 industry credentials here in Tennessee. It is valued in both accountability and in funding. And so we do know that this is our priority for our students, but we need to make sure that those credentials of value that they are earning are truly of value. So that's where we are with that. Seamless transitions really is centered on the dual enrollment space, making sure that, yes, we've got this great funding structure in place. We know that opened up access, but it's all about really the transparency about what do those dual enrollment credits really mean? Is it an elective? Is it a core course? Is it a pathway course? And are they really getting the credit at different institutions across the state once they earn that? And what does that mean? Is it a pathway, or is it a random active dual enrollment that was a scheduled filler? So it's about being transparent about that and making sure that our funding is structured, that it incentivizes those pathways for those students. Work-based learning, we've had a strong work-based learning component here in Tennessee, but really it's centered on 2 things. One, Scott, to your point as well, is that employer, making sure that those employers in those industries are at the table. It used to be really much just about the experience for the student, but we never had industry at the table to really talk about what do they value for those student experiences. And so what we are trying to do is we're trying to tier our work-based learning experiences so that we can offer transparency to our students about what they will get out of each one of those experiences. And when we say tiering, it's not tiering it from a job shadow to an internship, but it's about what is industry offering those students, what kind of experiences, and what is the value of those. So really excited about that. Also really centered on the rural work-based learning. We know that that's a barrier for our students, just being innovative in that space. And so we're doing some partnerships there to really extract best practices to share across the state in that space. And then kind of summing it all up and kind of that through line is that individualized advising. So it's all about making sure we have those conversations intentionally with our students through our innovative school models funding. We know that there's about 400 career coaches that are being funded out there, but what does that mean? And what kind of conversations are they having? We know that there's a lot of value in those. So really it's about ensuring that our students have access to really good individualized advising. And then ultimately, we would love to have a student-facing portal that's very interactive, that all this information will be at the fingertips, not only for students, but for families, for parents, for caregivers, for districts, and for our state agency partners, so that everybody has access to the same information and it becomes a really seamless experience for everybody that really equalizes all that information across the state. So really excited about this work.
I'm really excited about the work too. And I think these 4 pillars really kind of encompass a lot of these opportunities we're talking about for students. And I'm excited to dig in on some kind of pieces of this going forward. And just thank you for your leadership in that work. And a lot of what's being done at the department right now is kind of building it. And we have high schools that are thinking differently right now and districts that are thinking differently like right now, also kind of aligned and alongside that. But Scott Langford, I would love for you to like take us local. What are the
Mhm.
ways that Sumner County is thinking about high school differently, and kind of what is your vision for that?
Yeah, and I think I want to start because it's interesting because I've realized like one of the problems we have is we always thought it too high a scale. I drove around my first year as superintendent. Most of the time, I was director of instruction, chief academic officer, trying to figure out like how do I change outcomes for 9,000 high school students in a county. And to Scott's point, we've got to start small, try at 80%, build out a piloting model, and so at the same time, we've got to run it a little bit at scale. And I think that we've been afraid to start because we were afraid of we needed to be perfect before we rolled. And our kids are catching that same fear. Like one of the biggest things that I see that we're not preparing kids for the workforce is they're so afraid of failing that they're not willing to jump in and try. So the way that we're looking at that now, we were blessed with a 60,000 square foot innovation center that sits like the center, if you think about a spoken wheel. And so we're going to try to have the arrows go both ways. So it's not a school, it's not a magnet school or anything like that. The goal is for it to be a transformational space for high school kids to come together and then go back and take those skills to their local high school. And it absolutely 100% needs to be entrepreneurial. We've built around AI problem solving. We want critical thinkers, but also divergent thinkers, and we want them to ask questions about how AI will support that as we move forward. Not every problem is an AI problem, but they need to be prepared to have a basic literacy and fluency in AI as they move out into the world. We want them all to have experiences of leadership and project management. We want them to develop durable skills. I think you only develop durable skills by actually practicing them, not talking about them. And then we want our community to invest heavily in our kids, and we want them to engage that kind of mission mindedness that we see in them of giving back to their local community. And I think, I love what Scott said also about backward planning from a student's future dream. We're trying to empower students, our community, industry partners, state, regional, local, to give us design questions, and then we will put a team of students around it. We'll provide them community mentors and subject matter experts locally and around the nation with a end in mind of a project. So some of these could be quite large, others will be really small. Like we have kids from every high school doing an aviation academy now. On Fridays, even though they're doing aviation, they're working on these 4 main areas that we've identified, and they're working together on a community-based project with all the kids that are at the Innovation Center. We want them to take that back. I would say another interesting thing is we had a group of kids that wanted community service hours to be meaningful. So we have 14 kids from our high schools that are now getting 2 dual enrollment credits, industry certifications on project management, but they're also building a website for local charities and nonprofits to share their needs, and then kids can sign up. We've got a partnership with Hands On Nashville, with the United Way. We've got speakers coming in that do community work. And we had a 17-year-old young lady tell her career coach that she had no idea at 17 she could have such a big impact on her community. Later this spring, we have a healthcare venture capital company that funds, they do $50 million runs of venture capital in the healthcare IT space. They're going to do their boot camp for their new investors at our innovation center, and we're letting them use our space, and they're going to allow 10 of our kids to jump on 6 different healthcare startups. And so we'll build support and programming around that for kids to get that taste to see if that's something that they want. But that's in a nutshell, that's what we're trying to do in Sumner County, and then start small and then run it to scale as we find things that work.
Well, Scott, I appreciate your visionary leadership around this and just taking kind of the opportunity of this innovation center and really thinking about what's possible for students and how can it really be used as a tool to advance students on that. I had the great privilege of getting to come see it in person last week, which was really an incredible experience for me. And one of the things that um, I appreciated seeing was how you all were leveraging dual enrollment and expanding the opportunity of dual enrollment through the opportunities you're creating at the center. I would love to just hear you talk a little bit about kind of what you see as the opportunity of dual enrollment and how are you thinking kind of differently now about how you can expand access to that for students in Sumner County.
Yeah, I think the slide that you showed right at the start, Mary Cypress, about how few kids are taking advantage of the five dual enrollment credits. We have the ability to partner with TCAT and with a host of dual enrollment colleges, post-secondary options. And I think like I think our learning right now with our leadership class, our leadership professor from community college from Vol State has been phenomenal. Our Lean Six Sigma project management class, we're getting a regular, straightforward Lean Six Sigma class that would be, like they're working on washing machines, and it's a great experience for kids. They're learning a lot. But what it's taught us is we can be really specific with our dual enrollment partners to say we want the transformative learning experience of the student initiated project to sit at the center of the course and the coursework to be built around the students completing that project, as opposed to a course that then we try to find real world relevance for. So we're actually going to try to leverage our position as a major dual enrollment partner and the great thing is with Vol State, with TCAT Nashville, our other partners, they are very open to this process. The president of Vol State is a part of our core team, and we're really able to create some strong partnerships to redefine not just what high school looks like, but to start to redefine what post-secondary is, to blur those lines and align it so it's best for kids.
Well, thank you for that, and thanks for your leadership on that. I think it's just really incredible when you think about a county like Sumner County, where kind of your high schools are all over the county, and the opportunities of students look different depending on those high schools. To have this innovation center that can really open that up for all students is incredible. Scott Laband, you have been thinking about this for over a decade, you mentioned, and but I want to talk a little bit about dual enrollment with you and help us solve our challenges here in Tennessee. This data point sticks out to me so much. We offer 5. It's a gift to every student. Half are taken 2. How would you advise Tennessee to best leverage this opportunity we've created by funding and offering dual enrollment, knowing that some of the barriers are access, some of the barriers are alignment to kind of opportunity and student interest, instructor access, many barriers there, but kind of what would you advise us on how to think about dual enrollment and supporting students to be intentional and about how we're offering those courses to them?
I'm going to be humble here because I think advising y'all is a risky business because you're already so far ahead. But one of the things I would say is what Deborah mentioned off the top. Not all credentials are created equal, and so making sure that you have clear understanding of those tiers that Deborah spoke about, and then making that very transparent to students. I think the thing that's most frustrating to students is when we tell them that we reimagine high school and that it's now valuable and relevant to them, and then they try to go to post-secondary and those credits don't transfer. And so needing to solve that, I think, is essential. And whether that be through guaranteed articulation agreements that are enforceable and that we can have some accountability around is really important. We created a student bill of rights that's all around transfer policy that makes sure that the student knows exactly what's going to transfer, what is not, and they're required to be given notification for things that won't transfer and justification for why, and how they can appeal the decision. So I think giving students some agency to be able to, take what they learn in high school and make sure that they can move it into that next step is really critical. And then the other thing I would say, just 2 others real quick. One is consider pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships in this mix. I think they still offer students a lot of value in high school and should be thought of as like quasi-concurrent enrollment. I know that it doesn't exactly meet the definition, but there's a way to be thoughtful about integration there. And then the next piece is around access is so limited based on who can teach which courses. And so making sure that there's incentives and support systems that increase the number of teachers that have the credentials that align with those tier one credentials of value that you really care about and that you want to see students be able to access.
It's so actionable. I love that. And I think that that really does address, I think, a lot of these barriers that we are experiencing here in Tennessee. I'm also very intrigued by this student bill of rights because one of the challenges we hear often is that, a student will take a dual enrollment credit course while in high school, but then the institution that they go to doesn't actually accept that credit because the provider for that course was somewhat different. And I think that's been an opportunity for us here. I want to, in the interest of time, switch us to work-based learning because, as we mentioned up top, the coursework is such a key part, but kind of what's that real-world work-based experience that students are getting is also a piece of it. Apprenticeships are part of that. Other work-based learning is a part of that. And I think we know a lot about, hey, this has impact. This really leads to different outcomes for students, but at least in Tennessee, it's been a little bit of the kind of wild, wild west. Like some things are happening over here, some things are happening over there. Some of it's really great. Some of it we don't know if it's really great or not. And Deb, you and your team have been thinking a lot about kind of how at the systems level do we really think about how do we better support work-based learning? How do we support ensuring that it's quality, that there's expanded access, that partnerships look right, that kind of employer partners are really committing to the opportunity of this. And so I would love for you to share a little bit about kind of what do you think we need at the systems level in order to really realize this opportunity of work-based learning?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think, for us at the Department of Education, it's our role to really, I guess, get to the bottom of this quality conversation and ensure that everybody's at the table around that conversation. The right people, and industry partners, especially are centered in that conversation. And so that's what we're working on to the point that you made, Mary, around that tiered experience, because that will be, transparent for the students then when they engage in that. When we talk about the systems piece of that, I think what's important is that work-based learning, and to Dr. Langford's points there, it's almost like it's embedded. It's almost embedded in like the everyday life of a student, that it becomes central to that conversation, that it's not something in addition to. So that work-based learning experience works alongside that student earning dual enrollment, works alongside that student getting that industry credential, and they're all doing the three things all together. It's not, are they doing work-based learning or dual enrollment or earning an industry credential? But I do think that the word and it's a capital A and D, needs to really happen in between those, so that it becomes one fluid experience for our students. So I guess it's just, offering that experience that is not in addition to, that it works alongside everything that they do every day. But then I think at the state, we need to ensure that, the districts know the value of that as well. So we incentivize that through our accountability and our funding structure and our policies to help support our districts who offer those things for our students. And so ensuring that, they're prioritizing the outcomes for the TISA. When we talk about our programs of study, these work-based learning experiences are embedded right in that progression, and that they are valued at that highest level when you talk about the program of study progression there. But they're also valued alongside the industry credential and the dual enrollment experiences. And so it's making sure that our districts also feel supported in that, because success is just not participation alone. It's really a measurable economic mobility piece. It's not just participating, but it's what are the experiences and what is the student extracting from that experience. But I think when everything works together, when all systems work together, it really becomes that scalable pathway for our students that creates those opportunities that are not so limited. And Dr. Langford in Sumner County are really doing that in practice, which is really exciting to see.
I agree that they're doing that there, and I appreciate you bringing us to the systems level around how do we enable this. Scott Laband in 1 minute, because I want to give us time to kind of close out with everyone also. But can you tell us, what does quality work-based learning look like?
I'm
And
going to
what are
build
the
on
barriers to that quality?
Yeah, I'm going to build on something Deborah just said, which was integration. And so, like, as she was talking, I just thought of, if you want to improve your nutrition, you can either change your diet or you can take a bunch of supplements. What's going to have the more lasting effect? Change your diet. And so, if we can think about how we reimagine the experience in the classroom to integrate these concepts rather than feel like they're a bolt on, that's going to be really meaningful. And oftentimes, what we see is perceived resistance from educators is not actually resistance. It's a lack of understanding of how to create real world connections to the work when they themselves haven't had that experience of working in these environments. And so making sure that we sit and listen and really understand what are the challenges and how do we get past those. I would say a continuum is an important approach. In Colorado, we have a model that thinks about you learn about work, you learn through work, and then you learn at work. So figure out where you are on that continuum and then design the model that best meets what you're trying to achieve. Don't just kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Be intentional, be specific, and don't try to feel like you got to jump into the learning at work. I mean, that's the apprenticeship model. That's going all in. That's akin to getting married. Like, you can start by the very beginning of this and just, holding hands, go be friends with somebody and figure out how to make this work. And that's a horrible metaphor, I'm sorry. But let's just think about what it means to actually start small and then build over time.
I appreciate that. And that's that integration piece of all of this on all the pieces of how do you kind of build a strong high school experience is the key to it all. So to close this out, I would love for kind of just to give you each 30 seconds to share with us kind of what is your hope for what high school can provide for every student in Tennessee. And Scott Langford, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think that I would hope that sophomore, the junior, senior year, especially, if not sooner, would do what Scott just said. I love that learning about and through work, where we see more and more of our courses integrating that aspect into it so that kids are out in the community doing things. We work together to solve the structural problems. And something that he hit on that I want to reiterate that we're really looking stronger as how do we run teacher externships in the summer to scale so that they get real world experience of what's going on. Because even in our career technical, they're industry ready now, but in 10 years, the industry's changed. So we need to address that as well.
Thank you for that, and such a key piece there. Deborah, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me is that I guess my hope is that every student, regardless of zip code, regardless of their circumstance, has the opportunity to know what's out there and what's available and the transparency about that. And so have them take ownership in their pathway, but in order to do that, they need to know what it is. So just really making sure that they have access, opportunity, that they can see their future and they can, have that ownership in driving that forward. So
I love that hope. Scott Levan?
Three things: clarity, hope, and momentum. By clarity, I mean they need to understand their own strengths, interests, and values. By hope, they have a vision for the future. They know what path they need to go down to be able to meet that vision. And they have a belief in themselves and a confidence that they have what it takes to go down that path to realize that dream. Momentum, that they see themselves as post-secondary and career material, and that they ought to use your word earlier, used their time in high school to become a launch pad for their next step.
Thank you all for that. I'm leaving inspired. I'm grateful for each of your leadership and the work you are doing to really think about how do we support every student to have a high school experience that really launches them successfully into career and economic opportunity. We're grateful for the partnership with each of you all and would invite all of our participants and guests listening in to really come alongside us as we think about how do we accelerate this high school experience for students? So thank you all for being with us today, and thank you to our panelists for joining.